Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Manoj Singh Rana, and with me is Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar meets UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres in New York, stresses on countering terrorism and radicalization. India and New Zealand reiterate importance of closer cooperation for a rule-based international order and a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Bharat Biotech applies for WHO emergency use listing for Covaxin. Company submits 90% of the documents. Indian Cabinet approves opening of a new Consulate General of India in Addu city of Maldives. Cyclone Yas likely to intensify into very severe cyclonic storm in next 6 hours to reach near Odisha's Dhamra port by Wednesday morning. And in cricket, BCCI cancels India's 2020 international series against South Africa in September this year. As the number of COVID cases is on the rise, we appeal to our listeners not to lower the guard, follow all the precautions, and all those who have taken the first dose of COVID-19 vaccine to get vaccinated with the second dose at the scheduled time. Stay safe and protected by following these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now, the news in detail. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres in New York on Tuesday. In a series of tweets, Dr. Jaishankar said during their warm and comprehensive meeting, they discussed on countering terrorism and radicalization, which remain priorities for the entire region. The External Affairs Minister highlighted India's constructive role in the UNSC and conveyed priorities of our presidency in August. They also stressed on maritime security and technology for peacekeeping. They discussed the COVID challenge, emphasizing the importance of finding urgent and effective global vaccine solutions. They also discussed recent developments in Myanmar. Both leaders also exchanged views on climate change. Dr. Jaishankar reached New York on Sunday on a 5-day visit to the United States. In Washington, D.C., the External Affairs Minister will hold discussions with his U.S. counterpart, Antony Blinken. Now we move on to the hotspot section. In this section, we bring you a discussion on the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar's visit to the USA for strong bilateral ties. In conversation with Anil Vadva, former diplomat, is Nilova Roy Choudhury, journalist.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is on a 5-day visit to the United States. This is his first visit there since India assumed a place at the United Nations Security Council, and it is also his first visit there since the Biden administration took charge in Washington. AM Jaishankar is in New York today, where at the top of his agenda is a meeting with the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. India, which has just begun a new 2-year term at the UNSC, will be focused on the issues which it intends to highlight during this tenure, particularly when it assumes the rotating presidency of the UNSC later this year, I think around August. Ambassador Vadva, what would those issues be on which India would like to focus at the United Nations Security Council? And India has been very active on all the UN panels which it chairs and heads, including the ones related to counterterrorism. So what is the focus at the UN?
There are a number of issues on the UN agenda which are extremely important, which will be coming up in particular when India is in the chair of the United Nations Security Council. Top of the list, of course, is the issue of Afghanistan, US withdrawal from Afghanistan, which would happen around the same time. And as you rightly mentioned, India has been very much involved in the committees which are related to fighting terrorism and tables its own resolution every year in the United Nations. So External Affairs Minister Jaishankar Jaishankar would certainly be touching base with the UN Secretary General on the way forward as far as Afghanistan is concerned, how to build consensus in case the situation goes wrong in the country. And at the same time, there are two or three other burning issues before the UN as far as India is concerned. One is the issue of climate change, in which Secretary General Guterres is also very much interested in pushing the agenda forward. The expectations that are there from India in this regard. Third issue is about the ongoing Israel-Palestine issue. Now, of course, for the time being, we have a temporary lull as far as this fighting is concerned, and the issue is not so active at the moment, but can flare up at any time, especially given the volatile situation within the countries concerned because of the instability in governmental formation in Israel and also the lack of consensus within the Palestinians on its own leadership and elections. And fourthly, of course, is the whole issue about the various problems which can come up within the United Nations from time to time, dormant disputes, the COVID situation, how the UN plans to handle that, and how it should be handled within the WHO, because that's again a very difficult area to handle, where the WHO is going to hold a very important meeting in the next few days, early next month, in fact, on the way forward with regard to the origins of the COVID-19. So that's again politically a very charged subject in which countries would be taking sides. And finally, of course, is the whole reform of the UN system and the WTO in particular, where India needs to play a very important role. So all this would be an extremely important feeler kind of visit. As far as India is concerned, as far as the External Affairs Minister is concerned, he's already taken a review of the situation as far as India's positions are concerned with our officers in the permanent mission of India. So going forward, I think that will help India firm up its positions in the multilateral arena.
But Anil, realistically, the fact that the UN Security Council couldn't even agree on the wording of, say, asking for a ceasefire on the Israel-Palestinian issue, how realistic is it to see a general consensus being formed to carry a lot of these very crucial items on the agenda? I mean, Afghanistan is something that affects us all very, very seriously. Climate change, of course, UN reform. So what is your sense? What kind of progress or movement forward do you think there might be?
You are right in pointing out the UN is passing through a very difficult phase, and there is a sort of impasse within the permanent five of the UN Security Council at the moment, where they don't seem to see eye to eye on most of the issues. And therefore, it is then left to individual countries with some amount of influence or regional countries to play their own role in bringing about solutions to different problems. Ultimately, what does happen is that based on the evolving consensus, sometimes all countries of the UN Security Council then go along with that consensus. And this is exactly what has happened third time around on the resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. As you know, it was very difficult to get that resolution through because of the different interests involved, especially the United States, which did not want to see a resolution which was condemning Israel for the most part. And therefore, when after the ceasefire had been brokered, it was only then that we could get a consensus resolution past the UN Security Council. So I think today UN is one step behind, but at the same time, it's the only forum where consensus can evolve, discussions can take place, and feelings can be judged, on the basis of which then some solutions can be formulated based on the important players who are interested in that subject.
Dr. Jaishankar then travels tomorrow or later tonight to Washington, where apart from his important meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he is also scheduled to meet with other cabinet ministers and senior officials of the new administration who deal with the bilateral relationship. I'm curious, among these, is it possible that he would also perhaps call on either the Vice President or the President of the United States? Could that be something that happens?
Well, it's very rarely that happens unless the issue is very pressing. So one should not expect that during this visit, this kind of call-ons will happen. But you never know, because in the past we've had occasions when the U.S. presidents have dropped by casually to shake hands with the visiting foreign ministers, especially when the trip is important or when subject matter is important. So I would not rule that out, but we should not have too many expectations of those kind of high-level call-ons, given the fact that these are not normal, as far as diplomatic relations are concerned. But as far as the counterparts are concerned, to rightly mention, I think the agenda is very important this time. As far as India is concerned, it's an issue which relates to a huge population which is grappling with the situation back home of the second wave of the pandemic, in which India would like to have more raw material procured from the United States, and therefore some relaxations which will be required in the United States laws in order to procure those raw materials so that enough vaccine can be manufactured on time so that India can grapple with this situation back home in an able manner. And I think that's recognized by the United States. So some amount of preliminary work has already been done, and that's why this visit assumes that much more importance to firm up the future arrangements. And I know for sure that the Indian industry has got a lot of expectations as well from this visit on that score.
So vaccines are likely to be front and center of the kinds of meetings that he has. But there was also this report about a lot of Republican, particularly congressmen, writing into the president and saying that while you're more than willing to give vaccines, actual doses of the vaccine, sharing intellectual property is something on which there are a lot of second thoughts happening, and this entire process is getting further delayed because of that. The United States administration has, in effect, given the go-ahead for sharing of the intellectual properties for the vaccine preparations. But that coming into effect is not looking like happening in a hurry, and that's delaying the process here. So what then is the option, do you think? Buying vaccines, or how do you think External Affairs Minister will go about this?
So you're right in terms of waivers of intellectual property, etc. These are, long-term issues, and we know that as far as the TRIPS issue is concerned, of course, this issue will come up in the WHO as well, and then later on in the WTO, where there will be prolonged negotiations because there's no consensus as yet, despite the fact there are about 60-odd countries who have moved a resolution in this respect, and they have a support of another 40, a clear support. But there are important countries which are holdouts, and they are influenced, of course, by the lobbies of the chemical and pharmaceutical industry. At the earliest that could happen would be perhaps 6 to 8 months' time. But meanwhile, two issues are more important. One is, of course, the relaxation of U.S. laws, which allows for raw material imports into India and equipment into India, which allows India to manufacture its own vaccine. And after all, India has its own vaccines, and it can scale that up, provided there is enough support which is provided. Second issue is that in the Quad context, the United States is an able partner which has already committed itself to ramping up the production of vaccine in India. And with Japanese investment and Australian distribution, this can be a reality for the Indo-Pacific region. So keeping that in mind, I think that commitment needs to be followed through, and India should be made to manufacture these vaccines at the fastest possible pace, which it can be allowed to do so. And thirdly, of course, is the issue of making sure that the collaborations between U.S. vaccine makers and Indian vaccine makers proceeds faster. Johnson & Johnson, as we know, is the next vaccine which will be produced in India. But we also have the pending collaborations between two other U.S. vaccines and India, and that is stuck on some details about liabilities. So that is an issue to be hammered out as well. So in all this, if there is a push by the U.S. administration, it would help India, it would help the region, and I'm sure it will help the whole world in the process.
At this point, the Quad route perhaps looks the most efficacious and perhaps the fastest way in which this actually might work, because a commitment was already given by all the leaders of the four countries to ramp up productions in India so that vaccinations could be given out to Southeast Asia and so on. So that route perhaps could be one of the more effective ways, immediately sort of getting assistance and immediately managing to ramp up domestic production. And External Affairs is also scheduled to have these two interactions with business forums on both economic issues as well as COVID-related cooperation. So these do the issue of supply chains and IPRs again, or is it something different?
As far as the business meeting is concerned, we cannot expect that issue of IPRs would be discussed there. But I think the broad contours about who is interested in collaboration and whom they would like to collaborate with and what conditions and terms, etc., can be made clear so that then the Indian industry can be incentivized to approach their counterparts, in the United States on that basis. So that cuts short the time which is taken for understanding each other. And that's why these meetings become that much more important.
And it'll be External Affairs Minister is a very, very senior level at which this is being sort of pushed. I'm sure India's ambassador to the United States has also been doing his level of pushing to the best that he can. Why do you think External Affairs Minister had to travel to the United States in the midst of this pandemic to actually try and push things through? I mean, what was the imperative there?
It's not just the optics of it, but also the feel of what happens when you are physically present in a place, which makes the interaction much more important. And of course, the United States has been preparing the ground. He's been meeting companies over the past many weeks, in fact. And so things have come to a point where there are certain issues which need to be clarified at the level of the foreign minister. And he has a mandate from the industry as well now, as far as I can see, to talk on their behalf and to put forward their concerns and at the same time to clarify certain issues. And that then would help the industry counterparts to get in touch with each other and follow through easily.
So essentially a kind of a political push being required at this point to working out the nitty-gritty details largely, which have probably already moved ahead to some considerable extent.
And I think this is an issue which requires not just industry interaction, but also government-to-government interaction, where there are certain issues which can only be solved at the governmental level. For example, relaxation in U.S. laws cannot be done by industry themselves. I mean, they would then throw up their hands and say, well, we are bound by this law. And therefore, the presence of the minister on the ground there would be very helpful in taking these issues up.
And so among the people then that he would likely meet is the U.S. trade representative. Do you think that's among the cabinet ministers he's likely to be then meeting? Would that be a realistic assumption?
That would be a realistic expectation. And also don't forget that we've been talking about a limited early harvest, whatever you might call it, agreement with the United States on certain items of trade. And that could again be reiterated during that meeting.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador Wadhwa.
Thank you.
Welcome back. You are listening to the World News. India and New Zealand on Tuesday reiterated the importance of closer cooperation for a rules-based international order for a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. The third Foreign Office consultations between the two countries were held virtually. Comprehensively reviewing bilateral cooperation, both sides discussed the steps to be taken to enhance the depth and momentum of engagement in different areas including defense, security, trade and investment. Both sides also agreed to jointly work on space, counter-terrorism, cybersecurity, disarmament and climate change, and for strengthening people-to-people ties. Riva Ganguly Das, Secretary East, led the Indian delegation, while the New Zealand side was led by Mark Sinclair, Deputy Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The previous round of consultations took place in February 2019 in New Delhi. Hyderabad-based Bharat Biotech has submitted an application to the World Health Organization (WHO) for the emergency use listing (EUL) of Covaxin. The company has submitted 90% of the documents required for emergency use listing by WHO. The remaining documents are expected to be submitted next month. The company is awaiting for a pre-submission meeting to be held in May to June. Following the pre-submission meeting, it will be required to go through two more stages: the acceptance of the dossier for review and the final status of assessment before its application is accepted. On February the 15th, WHO gave emergency use approval to the Covishield vaccine produced by the Serum Institute of India, SII. So far, 7 vaccines globally have been given approval by WHO for EUL, that is emergency use listing. Russia's Sputnik V vaccine has also applied for emergency approval.
The Union Cabinet has approved the opening of a new Consulate General of India at Maldives' Addu city this year. India and Maldives share ethnic, linguistic, cultural, religious and commercial links steeped in antiquity. Maldives occupies an important place in the Neighbourhood First policy and the security and growth for all in the region, or Sagar vision of the Government of India. The opening of a Consulate General in Addu city will help augment India's diplomatic presence in Maldives and make it commensurate with the existing and aspired level of engagement. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
India continues to march strongly on its path of COVID recovery, with the number of daily cases slipping below the 2 lakh mark after nearly 40 days. In the last 24 hours, 1,96,427 fresh cases of COVID-19 were recorded nationwide. For the 12th consecutive day today, the number of patients discharged has outnumbered the number of new COVID cases. Over 3,26,000 COVID patients successfully recovered from the infection in the past 24 hours. The recovery rate in the country has further improved to stand at 89.26%. The India Meteorological Department, IMD, has said that the cyclonic storm Yas is very likely to move north-northwestwards, intensifying further into a very severe cyclonic storm during the next 6 hours. It would continue to move north-northwestwards, intensify further, and reach near the Odisha coast close to Dhamra port by Wednesday early morning. Talking to All India Radio News, Director of Forecasting in IMD, R.K. Jeenamani said it is very likely to cross North Odisha and West Bengal coasts between Paradeep and Sagar Islands, close to north of Dhamra and south of Balasore during Wednesday noon.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will deliver a keynote address tomorrow at the international event organized to mark Buddha Purnima Divas. The event is being organized by the Ministry of Culture and International Buddhist Confederation. Union Minister for Culture Prahlad Singh Patel and Minister of State for Minority Affairs Kiren Rijiju will also address the virtual event organized on the occasion of 2565th Buddha Purnima Divas. 6 Indian places have been added to the tentative list of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The sites are Satpura Tiger Reserve in Madhya Pradesh, iconic riverfront of the historic city of Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh, megalithic site of Hirebenkal in Karnataka, Maratha military architecture in Maharashtra, Beda Ghat, Lamita Ghat in the Narmada Valley at Jabalpur in Madhya Pradesh, and the temples of Kanchipuram are in Tamil Nadu. The Culture Ministry made the announcement recently. The submission for the list was made by the Archaeological Survey of India. Culture Minister Prahlad Singh Patel said India has several monuments which fulfill the parameters of UNESCO to be added in the list of heritage sites. Here is a report.
The iconic riverfront located in the ancient city of Varanasi has been competing for the UNESCO tag for several years now. The Ghat steps to the riverfront form a symbolic chain of the holy sites. The 6.5-kilometer long riverfront forms the eastern edge of Varanasi and possesses a unique history and presents a specific vision of a magnificent architectural row of lofty buildings and holy sites. There are 84 Ghats in total. The 5 most sacred Ghats are Assi, Dashashwamedh, Manikarnika, Panchganga and Adi Keshava. This is Diksha Saxena for World News, Delhi.
The Sensex and the Nifty today closed almost flat amid losses in the index heavyweights, even as the global cues were positive. The Sensex at Bombay Stock Exchange remained above the 50,500 mark, while the Nifty at the National Stock Exchange ended above 15,200 level. A report from the Business World.
Sensex fell 14 points to finish at 50,638. Divergently, Nifty added 11 points to settle at 15,208. In the Sensex pack, shares of 21 companies climbed, while 9 logged losses, while in sectoral indices, 13 out of 19 sectors climbed. In global equity markets, Asian stocks rose, tracking a rally in the U.S. equity markets. China Shanghai Composite Index surged 2.4%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng rose 1.8%. South Korea's Kospi climbed 0.9%, while Singapore's Straits Times and Japan's Nikkei 225 both gained 0.7%. European shares were mixed in intraday trade. Oil prices slipped marginally but were near one-week highs. In intraday trade, Brent crude prices were trading around $68.40 per barrel. Back home, gold prices remained flat amid the marginal price fall in international bullion markets. At the multi-commodity exchange, gold was trading almost unchanged at 48,560 rupees per 10 grams. Silver prices fell 280 rupees to trade at 71,530 rupees per kilogram. And in the foreign exchange market, a rupee appreciated by 19 paise to finish at 72 rupees and 78 paise against the US dollar, mainly due to weakening US currency, which is at a 4-month low level. Arjun Chaudhary for World News, All India Radio.
Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, has said that his government has informed India that Mehul Choksi is missing, with information being also shared with Interpol. Prime Minister Brown said the citizenship of Choksi will be revoked and he will be extradited to India once all his legal options are exhausted. Brown also said the law enforcement is working round the clock to locate Mehul Choksi. Fugitive Dimensia Choksi is wanted by the Central Bureau of Investigation (CBI) and the Enforcement Directorate (ED).
The Board of Control for Cricket in India, BCCI, has decided to cancel India's T20 international series against South Africa. The series was scheduled to be held in September as a build-up to the Indian side's T20 World Cup preparations. BCCI has also said the decision to cancel the T20 series has been taken keeping in mind the tight schedule ahead of the ICC T20 World Cup. They said there can't be any better preparation for the T20 World Cup than playing a high-intensity tournament like the Indian Premier League. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Washington Post writes that Biden Putin to meet next month in Geneva, the first face-to-face session between the two leaders. The Telegraph writes President Joe Biden and President Vladimir Putin will hold their first summit on June 16th in Geneva. New York Times reports that Florida became the first state to approve fines in social media companies that permanently bar political candidates in the state. The Guardian writes the UK trade with EU falls by 23% in first quarter as Brexit and COVID hit. Khaleej Times reports over 12.1 million vaccination doses have been administered in the UAE to date.
A partial phase of lunar eclipse will be visible in India on Wednesday. According to the India Meteorological Department, IMD, a total eclipse of the moon will occur on the 26th of May. It's said from India just after moonrise, ending of partial phase of the eclipse will be visible for a short span of time from northeastern parts of India except Sikkim, some parts of West Bengal, Odisha and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Science and Technology Ministry said the eclipse will be visible in the region covering South America, North America, Asia, Australia, Antarctica, the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. Lunar eclipse occurs on a full moon day when the Earth comes in between the Sun and the Moon and when all the three objects are aligned. The next lunar eclipse will be visible from India on the 19th of November this year.
A quick look at the headlines once again. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar meets UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in New York, stresses on countering terrorism and radicalization. India and New Zealand reiterate importance of closer cooperation for a rule-based international order and a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. Bharat Biotech applies for WHO emergency use listing for Covaxin. Company submits 90% of the documents. Indian cabinet approves opening of a new consulate general in India in Addu city of Maldives. Cyclone Yas likely to intensify into very severe cyclonic storm in next 6 hours to reach near Odisha's Dhamra post by Wednesday morning. And in cricket, BCCI cancels India's 2020 international series against South Africa in September this year. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Costa Rica. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.